This is part 2 of what will be a long-running series of homilies on what I'm titling The Catholic Moral Vision, 7th and final volume of these educational homilies. So we're going to be covering topics such as morality, evaluating difficult moral questions. We're going to be talking about medical ethics, social teaching, politics, things like that. Last week I said that the goal of morality is happiness in all of its 4 levels, the highest, of course, being the transcendental, the divine. And 3 years ago, in my very first educational homily on the teachings of the Catholic Church, I began by talking about faith and reason. And you probably don't remember that because I went back and read through the homily and I don't remember saying it, but I began this series of homilies by saying that everything in our mind, everything that we know, everything that we have learned, comes from one of 2 sources. Either we see things and learn them that way for ourselves, or 2, we were taught by another person. And the truth is that nearly everything we know comes to us from being taught by another person. We learn very little based off of strictly personal experience. You know, what's the 5th planet in the solar system? I don't think you figured that out on your own. How fast does light travel? I don't know how you can calculate that. What's the capital of Somalia? What do the Great Pyramids look like? Chances are you haven't experienced these things on your own, and so someone taught them to you, if you know these things at all. And if we needed to see everything in order to know that it's true, we would know very little. And so what happens is that we take a ton of stuff on faith and not just religion. It's the better part of our life that requires faith. You have faith that your math teacher is teaching you the correct order of operations and formulas and corollaries. You have faith that the maps are accurate in your geography textbook. So how do we know when to have faith in something and when not to? And this is an important question to answer, because if most of what we know is taught to us by someone or something else, there's a lot writing on this. And when it comes to morality, there is even more writing on this, because the consequences of being wrong about morality are a little different than being wrong on a math test. As I said last week, the things that we value are demonstrated in our actions demonstrate our character, and our character determines our eternity. That's a big deal. We're talking about eternity here. So how do we know that a source is correct when it comes to making the right moral choices? We better figure that out. Who do we turn to? And the answer is as simple as this. We have faith if we judge the speaker to be trustworthy. And who is trustworthy when it comes to morality? Well, remember what we talked about last week. We talked about short-term goals versus long-term goals. Both of them are valid. But if we only focus on short-term goals, our priorities are going to be out of order. So when it comes to eternal things, like the consequences of morality, we shouldn't trust sources that are only focused on short-term gains. That rules out TikTok. That rules out romantic novels. That rules out lifestyle magazines. That rules out nearly all celebrities. That rules out pretty much every politician. That rules out TV and 24-hour news channels. And it might, in some cases, rule ourselves out. If we're seeking guidance to answers to questions that we don't have, why in the world would we turn to ourselves for the answers? And yet that's what we're told, believe in yourself. Or if you put your mind to something, you can accomplish anything. And that's just silly. That's not true. Believe in yourself? How do you do that? Why would you do that? How is it supposed to give you the answers if we just believe in ourselves? And there's plenty of things that we will never be able to do no matter how hard we try. Remember that we were made for eternity. Our hearts are restless until they rest in God. So when it comes to making choices that have a great deal to do with eternity, it would make the most sense to trust an eternal source in the matter, and that would be God. clever way to kind of frame this from a logical perspective is what is called Pascal's wager. So Blaise Pascal was a priest, he was a mathematician, he was an author, and he was also one of the most skeptical philosophers during the Enlightenment of the 1700s, which is one of the most skeptical periods in human history. And he came to this, even in his skeptical reasoning, he came to a logical conclusion regarding the faith. He said, you can make one of two bets. Either I bet that there is a God, which would require me to act in a certain way, or a person could bet that there isn't a God, and so they can live however they feel. That's Pascal's wager. It's the name given to it. And Pascal felt that this wager was conclusive because there was only a couple of possible outcomes to making a choice in this wager. If you incorrectly believe that God exists, really you don't lose anything. Death is simply the end, and you just lived a morally good life. But if you correctly believe in God, you gain everything, hopefully. We gain heaven. We gain eternity. Or you can make the other choice. You choose not to believe in God and to do whatever you feel like, and if you're correct and God truly doesn't exist, you don't gain anything at the end. Death is the end. All you did was probably try to have fun, possibly to your own or someone else's detriment. But if you incorrectly wager that God isn't real, and you do whatever you feel like living a morally dubious life, you lose everything, and you wind up in hell. Now, that's a pretty much ruthlessly clinical way of looking at the faith, maybe almost cynical, but logically it makes sense. If you boil it down to those four options, basically, the four outcomes anyway, the wisest choice of the wager is to avoid all the possible bad outcomes by choosing to act like you believe in God. Now, faith is not a matter of just philosophy or making logical sense. Faith is a gift from God. It's not just a choice that we make. And Pascal understood this. He was a priest, after all. He wasn't just a scientist and a philosopher. So he said this: even if you don't believe or you struggle to believe in God, live as if you were a believer for 1 year and try it out and see if it makes you happier. And if it does, just keep doing that. And it will make you happy. We talked about this last week with the 4 levels of happiness. The less it's about me, the happier I feel in serving others and serving God. The more joy there is. And remember, the goal of morality is not following the rules out of fear of hell. It is seeking the ultimate level of happiness. So we trust God as the ultimate source of morality. Which brings us to an interesting point. Everyone's experience of God is personal to us. My relationship with God is different than yours, and that's how all personal relationships are. They're personal. So how do we reconcile having a personal relationship with God while at the same time having a set of moral laws that are more or less etched in stone? How is that personal? Is that contradictory? Well, let's talk about it. So there's 2 perspectives to everything. We have, on the one side, on one hand, objective reality, and on the other we have subjective reality. Objective reality is based on facts. It exists independent of our thoughts and our personal feelings. We observe objective reality. It can often be studied and measured by science. It's outside of us. Subjective reality basically exists inside of us. It exists in our mind. It's based off of our personal experience and our emotions. It is distinct from the actual thing itself. That's why it's subjective. It's about the subject, not the object itself. So, for example, objectively, we can say that a squirrel is a mammal, that a squirrel is a rodent, that a squirrel climbs trees. But subjectively, one person might think a squirrel is cute. Another might think a squirrel is a rat with a fluffy tail. Another person might see a squirrel as a pest that chewed through the wires in his car. So all of the above is valid. Those are all subjective personal experiences. and the objective qualities are obviously valid. However, we could say things that would be invalid. We could say that a squirrel is a fish, or that a squirrel would be an adequate replacement for a racehorse. Jockeys are small, but they're not that small, right? That would be ridiculous, because those subjective opinions do not match up with objective reality. So part of the goal of morality is that we want our inside subjective feelings and experiences to be on the same page with the outside objective things, the objective truth. And when this isn't the case, well, in the past we called those people delusional, but now it's kind of glorified to invent your own truth. We're all told to believe in our own truth. But actual objective truth is true regardless of whether or not I know it to be true. If a blind man is outside but can't see the trees are still there. The existence of the trees doesn't depend on whether the blind man perceives them or not. Objective reality exists independent of anybody's perception. But some people have a subjective view of reality. They claim that only that which I perceive or believe to be true is actually real. And some people have taken this subjective view to the extreme, even saying that physical things like gender or science is subjective, things that can actually be measured. But usually, what people tend to do is they apply this subjectivity to non-physical realities, truths about things like the existence of God, truths about morality. People will say things like, well, this is my truth, or that may be true for you, but it's not true for me. In other words, what is true or good depends on what I believe or accept, on what I perceive. And it's not just the case when it comes to actual practical life. Your actions have consequences regardless of what you believe. Now, don't get me wrong. Our subjective experiences are not invalidated by that truth. They're not only valid, they are valuable. The true nature of the human person is revealed in an objective way, the way in which God created us. There are truths about the human person that are true no matter what we believe, but those truths are experienced and they're studied in a personal and subjective way. For example, I can know everything about marriage and family objectively. I took, master's classes on the sacrament of marriage, but I will never experience it subjectively. Nothing will ever help me completely comprehend what it's like to create and birth and raise a child. So the question is morality, do we treat it objectively or subjectively? And the answer in many things in Catholic morality is both. The moral law itself is objective, but our choice to follow the moral law is the moral law is objective. Our choice to follow the law is subjective, and how we follow the law is subjective. And in the next few months, we will be talking about both aspects, both the principles of morality and how to apply them in individual circumstances. Our readings today really get at this idea of objective reality and subjective reality. In our second reading, St. Paul says this: I urge you, brothers and sisters, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that all of you agree in what you say, and that there be no divisions among you, but that you be united in the same mind and in the same purpose. This statement refers to objective reality. We can't agree and have no divisions among us if there is no such thing as objective reality. We have to have something to agree on. But then on the other hand, we go to our gospel reading today. As he was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew, casting a net into the sea. They were fishermen. He said to them, "Come after me, and I will make you fishers of men." And at once they left their nets and followed him. This is a deeply personal, subjective experience. Something must have been so remarkable at Jesus that they just left everything and followed him. Jesus personally calls his disciples from the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And this is the truth of our faith. It is the perfect balance and blend of both objective and subjective experience. And God calls to us by and through the real world, by and through his law, but he calls us by name.